Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books I review on this channel. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished listening to The Wisdom of Crowds. This is book 3 of the Age of Madness trilogy, which is in the First Law series by Joe Abercrombie. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, yeah, super dope. It's so good. Yeah, 5 stars, super easy 5 stars. I knew it would be 5 stars. I feel like everybody knew it would be 5 stars because I can't stop talking about this series. I love it so much. And it's my reread. So I already knew I'd love it. But I wasn't ready for how much I would love this one. I have had a lot of, I don't know if you guys are like this, but when it's a few years in between me doing a read, I can forget a startlingly large amount of books. I feel like I remember so many little plot points. But on this one, like, I felt like I remembered everything. And then when it was going down, there's all these things hitting me that I totally forgot about, including like one of the major parts of the very ending of the book, which is wonderful. I mean, it's so good because you get to kind of go through it again and have all those feelings of a first time read again. Now, there's so many things I remember about it, way more than I forgot, but definitely some things that I totally glossed over. Is that me? Is it you too? Because I kind of feel bad about myself right now, but whatever. But oh my God, this was good. I mean, I've been all over the place on my First Law rereads. I'm finally done. I read all 9. I know there's a 10th. There's this like short story collection. I don't really want to read it because I feel like I'm going to sour myself on First Law because I don't love short story collections. So I'm probably not going to read it. But yeah, it's every book I've read, I felt differently about on my second read from the first one. Literally all 9. I felt either liked it more, liked it less. In general, I liked them more. A couple, like maybe one I liked the same. But yeah, the one that was immediately prior to this, on my first read, I really liked it. On the second read, I thought it was the best one. Now, this one, the first time I read it, it was my favorite First Law book. And I declared that the Age of Madness trilogy is better than the original First Law trilogy, which at the time I felt like was controversial. I feel like a lot of people are kind of coming around to that mindset. Maybe even more than, maybe it's a majority. I don't know. But I hear that a lot now. But going into this one, I kind of felt like I missed out the first time I read it, that I put too much emphasis on the ending of things. Because when I read the initial trilogy again, I felt that way about the final book. I had created this perfect book in my head, and it wasn't that. It was wonderful. But on this one, I was like, man, it's supposedly the best First Law book, according to me. But I'm going to end up not liking it as much. But my God, it's amazing. And it is the best First Law book. He really showed off, he is an Abercrombie, showed off his expertise when writing this thing. Because in the first trilogy, he does a wonderful job at bringing everything to a head by that final book. In this one, there's so much meticulous planning that he was doing in the beginning of the series. I mean, in book 1 of the of this, was it A Little Hatred was the first one? I think there was A Little Hatred. And that came into the ending here. But not only that, there's all these characters and kind of themes from the first trilogy that get blended over into this final book and into this ending of the series and into the what's going to happen next. And that feeling that we have when we know that is predicated on the fact that we read the first trilogy and that we know there's these major events that are going to happen. And that there's clearly going to be more books written later on. And if there's not, that's a shame. I mean, it's no cliffhanger, although there's a little bit. But it certainly tees up more books in this series. For some reason in my head, I kind of felt like the series was done. Very much not so. There's very much more books going to come, and I can't wait. Because it's going to be like a revenge tour for a fan favorite character, and I can't wait to see that go down. And it's just amazing. The French Revolution style that this whole trilogy went down was so well executed. And on its surface, it feels like a blatant ripoff. I mean, down to some of the characters feel like they mimic real-life characters from the French Revolution. So many parts of it. And even the ending and the way it wrapped up and kind of like bringing the monarchy back, but with some changes and, that so much was similar, but he made it so different and made it so his own while simultaneously not really writing a fantasy book. I mean, these are fantasy because they don't exist in real life. They're made up locations. But there's virtually no magic in this series. I mean, a very tiny amount in this final book, right near the end. But it didn't have to be in there to make the book wonderful. But somehow he wrote this thing that felt like it was a retelling of the French Revolution and made it so amazing and wonderful and gripping. And obviously that period of history was gripping on its own. I mean, thousands and thousands of books have been written about it. But this is just, it's a perfect book. The characters here are probably the best of the bunch. I felt like the initial trilogy had a couple characters that were better than the best of the characters that we had in this trilogy. But by the end of this, I truly feel like characters like Savine, characters like Rika are hard to beat. And I mean, the way he wrote the woman characters in this was wonderful. And the character arcs that they go on, both of those characters in particular, they go through so much change. And I really love change in my stories with characters, whether it be for the good or for the bad. But you have these characters going kind of full circle in many ways, and then some. And I mean, they're two of the best written women characters in all of fantasy, and they happen to be in the same series, in the same book, in the way that they're all wrapped up here. And you'd finally get to see that come to fruition. The very ending of this story was so well done. And I get that there's probably a lot of people out there reading it that were disappointed in the ending, because there's characters that you love that get a bad ending. There's characters that you hate that get a relatively good ending. I love that kind of thing. I just love that kind of thing. I love to be disappointed. I love to have my expectations subverted in an amazing way like this. And Abercrombie did it. And even though I knew the writing was on the wall, even though I remember these characters in the past that they go, it still hit me like a ton of bricks and made me so angry. And it felt like the world is so unjust. And my world while I'm reading these things, I just get wrapped up. But it's amazing. I mean, how can a writer be so good? I mean, every component that you would look for in a book, besides a compelling magic system, which I don't think is necessary to write a wonderful book, but the characters are quite literally like top of the class. A writing style that I find to be, it doesn't really get much better. There's different writing styles out there, some that I like very equally as well, but this is right at the very, very, very top of it. A story that is right at the very top of it. And that's what the first trilogy lacked. I mean, the first trilogy was great. The characters were great. The writing was great. It was punchy. It was funny. It was smart. But this one had the story too. And it obviously the first trilogy is good and it's got an interesting story, but that's not what carries it. Especially in the first book, it feels very like not a lot happens. It's a lot of setup. And even later on, you get some pieces knocking down, but they feel kind of disjointed a little bit. And it just wants the characters to be the star. Here, I mean, the plot is incredible. And I'm having trouble talking about this without spoilers, because I'm saying a lot of things that are generalizations, but I kind of have to do that because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that haven't read this trilogy, that liked the first trilogy, if not loved it, that went, yeah, I mean, I've heard it's different. It's a different time period. I have other things I'm going to read. What are you doing? What are you doing? And I felt that way about the standalones, where I was like, man, I hate standalones. They're awesome too. I mean, this whole series is amazing. Every piece of it. I got a bigger appreciation out of this one, more out of some of the side characters as well. Like characters like Clover, who is this northern character who is known for flipping sides and being very open about the fact that he holds no loyalty other than himself. But he's got such a gregarious personality that nobody can really hate him. And following that character arc was really, really compelling. Even the very end of it, I mean, it just felt like it was perfect. Characters like Gunnar Broad, who could have a whole book written about them, where it's this character that got brought in. The character did not need to be in the story. That at very few points was this character pivotal to the story. They were in these major moments, but they weren't the star of the show. It's as if Abercrombie said, I don't have enough words written. I need to write another arc that's not going to mess up anything else, that can play into some of the arcs that I already have done, but I need to tell another story here. Because it just kind of feels like out there, and it's its own thing about this character who came back from the war and wants to be a better man. I love that, by the way. That overall theme that Abercrombie always writes about is trying to be a better person and always having trouble doing it. And it's never been exemplified better than this character, Gunnar, because he says, I want to be done with violence. I want to go get a normal job. But he keeps getting pulled in and pulled in and pulled in to be violent and to do bad things and to cheat on his wife and to go move away and to do these horrible, horrible, horrible things. And at the end of the book, you feel like this character is finally, the arc is there. And then it just predictably, as Abercrombie would do, shows you that this character has not really changed. And they've tried so hard. And you've got to be in their head and you feel the pain they're going through. But they can't be that better person. That's amazing writing to me. Because it is so easy and fun and rewarding to write these character arcs with a character trying to be better, and by the end of the story they finally are. But to write a character who's trying to be better and by the end of the story they are not, it's really touching. It's touching. It hits on so many things that I think makes us human, and I think that a lot of us suffer from that. And I've had moments in my life where I've struggled with things and I've tried to become a better person and do better things. And I look back on things and I'm like, how am I better? What have I done differently? And am I just destined to make the same mistakes over and over and over again? And that's real life. And it's not glamorized, and it just is. And I love that Abercrombie's able to really hone in on that with this character. But at the same time, and as true to form for Abercrombie in the first series as well, we do get some characters that do get that relatively happy ending. But none of the happy endings that he writes are perfect. They're bittersweet. They have conflicting emotions going into them, where at the end of the day, you're like, they won. They did it. But at what cost? At what cost to themselves? At what cost to, their bodies? At what cost to their friendships and their loved ones? And even the bad characters here, they did they lose? Did they win? There's these different sides to them. Even characters that are about to be killed go through these little mini arcs at the same time on reflecting on their life. And it's Gray written perfectly. There's this emphasis, I think, and maybe it's waning out now, but there was this enormous emphasis for a very long time, and I think it's still popular, but writing a lot of Gray characters. We saw A Song of Ice and Fire do something relatively similar, but not even to that great of a degree, because you have characters that are truly good. I mean, Ned Stark, Jon Snow, these are characters that are as good as they come. In something like The First Law, it's Gray written perfectly. It's not Gray for the sake of being Gray. It's Gray because it's real life. It's Gray because that's a compelling story. It's Gray because this is what makes you connect with characters. And when I say Gray, I don't mean black. I don't mean everyone's horrible, but they're not like serial killers. I mean that even the characters that have very little major events to do in the story, that don't end up killing anybody, that just exist, are troubled. I mean, in this story, we have a king, and the king has done nothing truly wrong. They were given the kingdom. They didn't ask for it. They were born into this. They are not a horrible person. They're not the greatest king by any means, but they weren't. It's not their fault. It their parents' fault. And this character in particular, you can't necessarily root for this character because they have so many personality flaws, and they obviously would be a bad ruler, but you feel compassion for this character. I mean, you've got this character who is on the other side of the coin, who is trying to take over the throne and has an enormous amount of negative traits about them. But you spend more time with this character, and you realize why they are who they are, why they're making the decisions that they're making. At the end of the day, they're just trying to do the right thing. Characters like Savine, who I just got through talking about being such a wonderfully written character and just a great woman in literature, starts out the story as basically a slave owner, running manufacturing plants with the cheapest of cheap labor and children working, like children slave workers, basically. And you're rooting for this character. You find yourself rooting for this character. And that's great writing. That's hit the nail on the head. So I can't get over how wonderful Abercrombie is and how wonderful this series is. And finishing the series now moving back up. For a little while, it moved down to my number 3 favorite series. Is back up to number 2, behind Malazan and right ahead of Dandelion Dynasty. And I imagine it'll stay that way for quite a long time. And I'm finding myself so thoroughly looking forward to what Abercrombie has up his sleeve next. He's writing a new series. He's writing this. It's either the book or the series. It's called The 𝗣𝘁𝗁. It comes out next year. And a totally different thing. It sounds wonderful. And I hope so dearly that he eventually comes back to write the next arc of the First Law, because it's begging to be written. And I got to find out how a certain Magi reacts to the events that happen in this book. I can't wait. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Amy, Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, JD, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝐿, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Slay, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Zion, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry W, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Sky, and Tyler. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.